The Supreme Court has agreed to take up state bans on transgender school athletes. Now, the justices will have two cases regarding state bans on their docket during their next term starting in October. The decision to hear appeals defending state bans from Republican leaders in Idaho and West Virginia brings the dispute over transgender rights before the High Court. Joining me now is the Hill's courts and legal reporter Zach Schoenfeld. It's already been a blockbuster year at the Supreme Court. Now the battle over transgender rights in school sports will arrive in front of the justices. What's at the heart of this case?
Hey, Judy, this is, as you mentioned now, the next big frontier of the legal battle over transgender rights following that recent decision upholding Tennessee's gender affirming care ban for minors. This case really picks up where the justices left off, because in that case, they said that Tennessee's ban did not draw lines based on sex and it did not draw lines based on transgender status. So it left open some of these broader questions as to whether transgender people as a class are entitled to heightened constitutional protections against some of these laws. So these states in these cases have been saying that that recent decision from the justices did nothing to address these cases here. And so now we expect to see the justices get involved in some of these weighty constitutional issues that they were able to keep open by issuing a little bit more of a narrow ruling in that Tennessee case. So this really could stand to impact a lot of legal battles surrounding transgender rights, not even just in the context of school sports.
Zach, the court, as you know, currently has a conservative majority. There are currently 27 states that restrict transgender athletes' participation in school sports. Are there lower court rulings they could lean into?
There are. In many of these laws, they have been challenged all across the country in various lawsuits. Many of these cases are being brought by the ACLU. That goes for the two cases that are now before the Supreme Court, cases that come out of both Idaho and West Virginia. And what was interesting about the timing and the procedure of these cases, so after the justices, issued that decision last month upholding Tennessee's youth transgender care ban, over as they'd been considering that case, they had really had a pileup of requests to take up new cases that implicate transgender rights. They had been piling up. Once they issued that decision, they started taking a look at these again, and they sent back a whole lot of other disputes. For example, there was a case out of Oklahoma that dealt with its refusal to change someone's listed sex on their birth certificate. There were cases involving state Medicaid programs that exclude gender-affirming surgeries. And so the Supreme Court in all those cases decided to send it back to lower courts for another look in light of their recent decision. But they decided that they weren't going to do that here for these transgender athlete cases. Instead, they sided with both the Republican attorneys general from Idaho and West Virginia, who had urged the justices to go ahead, take up this case now for their next term in order to resolve this issue that, as you mentioned, is going to impact laws passed in more than 24 states.
Zach, the battle over transgender athletes isn't new, as you mentioned, and the Trump administration just settled with the University of Pennsylvania, requiring the school to strip Leah Thomas of her record titles and agreeing to no longer allow transgender women to participate in women's sports. Could the administration's interpretation of Title IX, along with President Trump's executive orders, have an impact on the court's opinion?
It could. The Supreme Court in these cases is taking not only up the question of whether these laws violate the 14th Amendment's guarantee of equal protection, whether these unconstitutionally discriminate against transgender people as a class, but it's also taking up a second legal question specifically related to Title IX. And the arguments that we've heard from the states is that essentially they're stuck between a rock and a hard place because they now have these lower court rulings that say that these bans on transgender athletes violate Title IX. But then you also have the president now signing executive orders extending a very different interpretation of Title IX. And at times, as we've seen, they've been threatening funding for various schools and states that have refused to oblige. So what we've really seen these pleas from the states is saying they're being forced to either comply with a court ruling but also at the same time potentially risk funding from this administration. So really some of these developments by the president have been coming into play in these court cases.
You have a new issue of your newsletter, The Gavel, out this week. You wrote about the battle over birthright citizenship just getting started. What's next in this monumental legal battle over the constitutionally protected amendment?
Well, now that the Supreme Court has limited the ability for district judges to issue nationwide injunctions, it has really created what is now a second phase of this battle over birthright citizenship. The Supreme Court has yet to resolve whether Trump's executive order is constitutional. So now that nationwide injunctions have been limited, we've seen the plaintiffs go back to the trial courts and make a new push to try to get this executive order blocked. So we have now seen plaintiffs in 3 separate cases attempt to file a nationwide class action that would have the same practical effect as a nationwide injunction. It would cover anyone who could be denied citizenship under Trump's executive order if it's allowed to go into effect. And this is really now going to be the key tool that we see plaintiffs start to use. And now we're watching because these judges have set some pretty fast schedules. There's going to be some hearings over the next week or so. And then once those judges rule, we could see these cases very quickly get back up to the Supreme Court. And it could give them an opportunity as early as this summer to have to get involved on whether this order is constitutional.
Zach Schoenfeld, thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks, Judy.